Welcome back to Switch to Linux. Today we want to do a Linux Mint OEM setup. So this is for the people who are really sick of Windows or Mac, you're looking for other alternatives, and you look at what distros you might move to. So first, let's go ahead and define that word I just used, a distro. In the Linux world, all these different software packages that are the operating system itself are called distros, short for distribution. Linux has a variety of different distributions. Ubuntu is popular, Linux Mint is popular, Endeavor OS is popular, Fedora is popular, Zorin OS is popular. There's a lot of these different distributions that are out there. And one of the big criticisms people say is, well, I don't know which one to do. You know, just like you're starting anything, just jump in and try something out. I always recommend that people start and try out Linux Mint. The reason I would recommend Linux Mint is it works on the widest array of hardware. It is the easiest to set up, and since the basic default Cinnamon has a lot of similarity to a traditional Windows setup, not Windows 11, but a traditional Windows setup, this is the lowest overall learning curve for most people. Is it the absolute best, perfect, nobody should ever use anything else? Obviously not. There are reasons to use different distributions. Now, I recommend this just because rather than you spending the next 5 years sifting through which distribution to finally use to settle on some small obscure one with no documentation, the Linux Mint team has a lot of documentation. They have worked out most of the bugs. It's very rare that you would find any error on your system that somebody else has not already addressed, and it's very rare for the system to kill itself. I have had it happen before, but there were mitigating factors and things like that, and that's not something that is extraordinarily common. So I would just recommend starting with Linux Mint. So, and here's where we get into a little bit of the difficulty, is installing an operating system, because most consumers, if you've never installed your own operating system before, almost everybody, when they need a new computer, they will go out to the store, Best Buy, Walmart, Target. They pick up a computer, they bring it home, they plug it in, they turn it on, and then they're greeted with a setup screen. It's going to ask for your username, your password, all this type of stuff, and then you're going to go ahead and fill out all the information. You're going to set it all up, and you never really have to install the operating system. Now, if you've ever built a computer, you know what installing an operating system is like. Installing Windows is a royal pain. Now, people do not often mention that because almost nobody ever does. But if you want to install side by side Windows and Linux by and large is easier, unless you're doing something like Gentoo or Arch totally from scratch or something like that. Those are some of the exceptions. But Linux Mint, Ubuntu, most of those other ones I mentioned earlier, you simply download your installation media. You burn it onto a USB drive, you boot your system into it, and then you install. Now, you have to be careful, of course. You do not want to overwrite your operating system, your current operating system, in the event that you don't want to lose it. And the good thing about Linux is you can run Linux on external hard drives or flash drives or anything like that. So I have external hard drives like this one floating around. I can plug this guy right on in and install directly onto this. Now, we're not going to do how to install it on that. I have several videos on that. There's a few other factors I don't want to mention. Where we're going to start in today is, first I'm going to show you a basic OEM install on a virtual machine, and then we're going to show you what that is. Because a Windows, when you go out to Walmart, you buy your computer, you bring it home, you plug it in. What you see when you boot that up is that OEM screen. It's going to ask you for your username, your password, all this other information. And it's going to go ahead and get your computer set up and configured. That's what an OEM install is. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you an OEM install. And again, there's other factors in this. This is not a video to teach you how to download the distribution and install it on your computer. This is more of a video about setting it up. So if you are not a tech-savvy person and you know a tech-savvy person and you want to give this a try, ask them, hey, could you get me a USB drive with either a Linux Mint install, or better, can you set me up a Linux Mint OEM install? And so what this is going to be is they're going to give this to you. They might give you a hard drive, or you would give them a hard drive, be like, hey, can you wipe this thing out and do an OEM install? And then you're going to plug this guy into your computer and you're going to set it up. So we're going to go ahead and get into this. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to go on over to a virtual machine. So I have a virtual machine set up here, and I have an LM OEM. So this is a Linux Mint OEM. In the optical drive, I have put our Linux Mint Cinnamon, and now we are going to start the system. So when I start the system, you'll see on Linux Mint that we have Linux Mint compatibility mode, and we have OEM install for manufacturers. This is the one that we want to pick if we're doing that installation. So what this is going to do is it's going to install your system except for your basic username and things like that. You are going to set up a username. You are going to set that information up, but it's going to be overwritten the first time you boot it up, prepared to hand it to the person who's installing it on their final operating system. And you'll see what I'm talking about here when we get into this. So we're going to start by giving it a unique name for this batch of systems. I'm just going to go ahead and call this Cinnamon. You want to pick your language. And then your keyboard layouts. So just pick your country. If you're in the United States, just US on each of the two panels here. Now install multimedia codecs. So this is required to play some places like YouTube, may require it in some places. Installing certain types of media formats, certain types of movies. You're going to want to install that in order to watch those. The reason you have to check this is in some countries that may not be legal to install. So that's just to make sure that you're clear. If you are unaware, you might consult laws in your area. If you're in the United States, generally not a problem to click that button, at least for a computer for personal use. All right, so now we have the option to erase the disk or something else. And under advanced features, we can do none, use LVM, erase disk, you can use ZFS. So ZFS is an alternative file system. I generally just use your basic LVM, which gets you a Linux file system called ext4. That's not important. ext4, ZFS, Btrfs, all those are things thrown out there. If you're new to Linux, don't worry about those. You can research those later. Now, if you want to, you can encrypt your new Linux installation. This is going to make sure that nobody can get into your computer at all without supplying a password. So we're going to go ahead and hit install now, and now we have to enter a security key. So I'm going to go ahead and just make up a good security key here. So you'll see it tells me good password. Now I have to enter it again. So that matches. Now I can do a recoverable key. This will give you a secondary key file that you can use and you can save it. It might be recommended to do this. It might not be. You have to weigh your own decisions on that. I generally have never had a problem with this. Just make sure you do not lose this password or you are going to be in trouble. Overwriting empty disk space is going to clear out anything and everything that was on that drive. It's ultra secure, but it does take a while. We're not going to do it for the case of this instance here. So we'll go ahead and hit install now. So go ahead and pick your time zone. And this is where you're going to enter information. Now, this one is just for the manufacturer setup, and this is not going to be the overall username. I'm just going to pick OEM here just for the sake of simplicity. And then once we hit continue, this is the part it's going to take, between 5 and 10 minutes, maybe up to 20 minutes, depending on the speed of your system and your internet speeds. It's downloading files from the internet. It's installing the system. And once this is done, it's going to tell you to go ahead and reboot. So we'll come back when we get to that screen. All right, so you can see now it says restart now. All right, so now what we have done is we have an installation. So if I were to have installed that onto something like this hard drive or a flash drive, and since we didn't talk about all of the little odds and ends in between, I'm going to go ahead and link a video down below where I do install, and I'll walk you through a few of the extra steps, getting into BIOS and stuff like that. But now that we have an OEM install on our drive, we're going to plug this into the target computer. And then again, you need to get back into that BIOS again, which is going to be covered on the installation videos. It's the same process. Many computers, it's either F11 or F12 will get you a single time boot menu, and then you're going to select the drive. You might get into your setup with escape or delete or insert or F2. It really completely depends on your computer. So nobody can just say, oh, it's this button. Completely depends on your computer. You're going to need to do a little bit of internet searches to figure out which one it is. Now on Linux Mint, traditionally you would not need to disable secure boot, but depending on how closely you're watching this video, there is a little bug where it's disabled. At least it will be disabled on the next version temporarily while those bugs are worked out. So if you can't get it to boot, you will need to get into the BIOS of your system and disable secure boot. Now, what we're going to do then is we're going to boot off of this drive, and then once we boot off of this drive, we're going to show you what the next section is going to look like here. All right, so now this is our boot up, and when you get into your boot up system, since we created this with an encryption, we're going to be greeted with this encryption unlock. So we're going to enter the encryption key that we had to the hard drive. This is going to make sure that nobody can get into your Linux installation at all anywhere without this particular password. This is different from your user password, which people can get around a user password fairly easy, but this full disk encryption, it's a lot harder to get around. Now that we have that entered, it'll tell you it's set up successfully, and now we're going to boot. Now, this is the very first time it's been booted. It is not yet ready for your OEM installation. This is your pre-OEM. So this is the person who's going to create your OEM disk for you is going to create, and they're going to go ahead and get in here and make any small configuration changes or anything else, and then they're going to run something. So in this case, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to fix the display. You generally are not going to have this issue. This is just because we are on a virtual machine. Now, any other changes that we do right here are going to occur and change before the system gets set up. So these are your first steps. We're going to walk through these after the OEM setup, just to say you can do a few changes or adjustments to this operating system before handing it to the person who's going to finally install it. Once you make any changes you want, you can go ahead and click on this guy here. This is the user password, which remember from our install was OEM. Once you authenticate that, you'll see that OEM config will run the next time the system boots. So now the system, you can uninstall it, and now you're going to take the system, you're going to hand it to the person who's going to finally install it on their system. If you're setting this up for somebody, you might walk them through that whole process. I'm just going to go ahead and hit the restart button, and then that's going to boot this whole system back up. We're going to have to re-enter our disk encryption. So enter our disk encryption. That should tell us it is set up successfully. And now that we have already booted into it once, we've made any changes in configuration issues that we wanted to do, now it's going to run our very first boot. It looks like it's not going to save our display changes. That's a virtual machine thing. Don't worry about that. Okay, so this is our first boot setup. We're going to start by selecting our system language. This is your system keyboard, and then your time zone will get reselected over here. And now you need to enter your username. So this is going to be the final computer name. I'm just going to call it Mint, and using my super secret password that's definitely not 123. And this is going to do final system configurations, configure the keyboard, and make any final adjustments getting ready for the user's first time use. Now it's applying our final changes. You can get details with that little push down, but you'll see it's rebooting the system again. It looks like it's not rebooting the whole system. It's just getting us to the point where we can now log in. So we'll go ahead and get logged in, and we are landing on our screen. So this is really where we're going to start in. If this is your first time running Linux Mint, we're going to run through a few basic configurations. So our first steps, you're going to pick your accent color and your overall color of the system. The default is this light mode with some blue highlight accents. All right, you can pick your favorite color here from the layouts. Pick any one that you want, and then you can choose a light mode or a dark mode. I will note here that the very next version of Linux Mint 21.2, this guy here is going to be a little bit more robust with a few more changes, and there's going to be some theme settings in a different location. Now, we have a modern and a traditional panel layout. Your traditional panel layout behaves kind of more like an old Windows XP system. These are all quick launch icons. Every time you push the button, you get a new one of those. And I'm well aware you can come down here and like a middle click and do the same thing on the modern way. That's not my workflow. I don't like it. And I think that most people who really like the older systems are going to like the traditional better. Of course, the modern does have a little bit better of a quote-unquote look, but this is where it's going to behave more like things are pinned to the taskbar. You can't see quite as easily how many applications are open or things like that. I personally, for that reason, like your traditional layout, but that's simply a matter of personal preference. Of course, if the panel is too small, you can always right-click down here. You can enter panel edit mode. You can do panel settings. You can actually make the panel height larger as well. So if you really like the old layout, but you kind of like to, it looked better with the bigger icons, there you have it. Now our panel is all good. Turn off panel edit mode. Now we have, every time I launch this guy up, it's going to give us a separate instance, and we're going to be able to see the various instances that we have booted up down here on the bottom. Exactly the way I like my system. Those, again, are matters of personal preference. Your system snapshots, this is going to be like your Windows restore points. It's going to create a snapshot of your setup, so if an update breaks something, you can simply roll it back to a previous version. Driver manager is if there's any type of drivers that did not get installed, something's not working, maybe your Wi-Fi card or something like that, you can go ahead and launch this, and this is going to look for any extra software that needs installed to get your system working. Now here on Linux Mint, your updates and system information is down here at the bottom. This guy down here is system reports with the little exclamation mark. Your system reports gives you information about your system, crashes, and has the information about your system. So if you're seeking help somewhere and people are like, well, give us the system information, you're like, I don't know what that means. Click on right here. You can copy it, and now you can just paste this directly into any forum where people are asking information. This will tell a Linux geek a lot about your system and will probably be able to issue some form of help. In this case, it's giving us a notice about language packs because Linux Mint does have way too many language packs it wants to install by default. You go ahead and hit ignore this report and you will never see it again. Setting up the time shift, that is the item from up here for your system snapshots. That's the time shift application, and it will give us a system report about that. The next one is your update manager. Your system updates are managed down here. So we go ahead and hit enter, and we get this blue button, do you want to switch to a local mirror? So this means that when it goes to do an update, the system, it's going to work better if you pick a fast mirror closer to where you are. So we're going to go ahead and hit yes, enter your password, the user password that you created. And when you do this, you're going to get this software sources. So there's two main mirrors in Linux Mint. This is your main one, and this is your base one. So click on this guy here. It's going to open up a window, and it's going to probe all these different things for speed. What I found is here on the East Coast, the Linux Mint one is generally the fastest, but you can pick either the fastest or the ones you like the most. If you're a big Harvard guy, you might click the Harvard School of Engineering because, personal choice, whatever else. But you can go ahead and do that. And then with the base, there's probably going to be something a lot better than me loading off of a United Kingdom Ubuntu server. So we'll go ahead and let those guys do its probing thing. And once we get a good mirror set up, and then it's going to ask us to refresh the cache. We'll talk about that in just a moment. All right, so this one here at BrightBridge, it's still probing them, but we'll just go ahead and pick this one here at BrightBridge. And now we got this purple box down here. This is going to be the highlight of your color. We chose purple. So you want click OK to update your cache. The apt cache, this tells your system what needs to be updated and what doesn't. So you want to do that every time you make changes to your mirrors. And then what's going to happen is every time you go to do updates or the system goes to check for updates, you can go ahead and just have this guy already set up for you. So here's what it's doing. And now that it's done, we can close this window. The first thing it wants to do is run an update to the update manager. This is common in Linux Mint, that they push out a new version of the update manager and it gets that before it gets any other updates. So we'll go ahead and do that. And the icon down here at the bottom will tell you what it's doing. If it's the orange icon like we saw earlier, it means there's system updates to do. If it's a check mark, then it means that the system is up to date. Actually, I think right now there's nothing if it's up to date. So these are all the things it would like to update. If there's any package for some reason you don't want to change, you can go ahead and right-click and ignore the current update or all future updates. Generally, this might be something you might want to do if you know something's going to break, but for the average user, the new user, you don't need to worry much about that. There are some automation systems up here in the preferences. So if we come up here, you can hide the update manager after applying updates. You can only show a tray icon when updates are available. You can refresh the list of automatic updates. This is updating that package cache. So it'll refresh the updates after 10 minutes and then refresh the list every 2 hours. You can turn that off and it will never do an automatic refresh. And then you can also show updates on different periods of time. Don't show notification update was applied in the last 30 or whatever days. I forget how long you can go on this. Might be 30, might be the highest we can go. I don't know. Oh, no, we can go higher. So it looks like 90 days. So this system here, it will not check for updates for 90 days. So for people that don't want to see updates all the time, you can go ahead and do that. There are some automated things. The one thing I would recommend automating is this guy here. This is the one system that I've had break a Linux Mint computer before. This is the only real major cause of a breaking of a Linux Mint computer before because the traditional way of fixing this didn't ever work, and this seems to work just fine. So that's actually a pretty good thing. So this is the update manager, and this just updates the core software. But we also want to talk about installing software itself. So this is the software manager. Now you can get to the software manager over here in the menu as well. But what we're going to do here is it's going to load up that package cache, and then first time you run this, it's going to take a little bit more time. And this is going to have a list of all of the software available for you to install without having to go onto the internet and do random searches to find stuff, which always is a source of potential malware on any type of computer system, is going to the internet. Inside this software manager, the Linux Mint team makes sure everything in here is safe, and there is more stuff in here than you will ever possibly know what to do with. All right, now that it is done, you can see down here we have just a lot of things. So we have Blender for 3D modeling, VLC, we have SM Player. I think I missed a row. Maybe I didn't miss a row. I don't know. VirtualBox, Audacity. So there is a variety of software available inside of here that is all freely available for your system. You can also sort by different types. If you're looking for graphics specifically, here's what we have. Here's GIMP, here's Calibri for ebooks, GThumb for image browsing, Shutter, we have Kdenlive for making videos, Darktable for professional photographers. So we have just a lot of different stuff down inside of here. If you're looking for web browsers, Firefox is already installed. We have Chromium. And you can also search for browsers up here in the search bar. And you can see that we have Epiphany as an option. We have Chromium. Conqueror is a browser. Some of these that don't have pictures, they're kind of older ones. But you can get a variety of different browsers. I don't know if Brave is available on this one yet. So Brave browser, you're going to have to install a little bit different way if that's one that you want to look at. See if LibreWolf is available. So LibreWolf, this is a high secure, high privacy browser, so that's another really good choice as well. So you can see there's more stuff in here than you can possibly imagine. Here's just coding, applications. Here's basic internet stuff. I think we've been through there already. Here's games, if you want to install some games. Basic random accessories. So you can go ahead and install whatever types of software that you are looking for. So hunt around for the software or do some basic searches over here, and you'll be able to do that. Inside of your system settings, again, your system settings is over here on the panel. On the menu, I should say, we have our themes. This is the part that's going to change in the next version, where instead of having all these drop downs with all these different layouts, they're really simplifying this. You can still get to this with an advanced option that's going to have, but it'll be a lot easier to basically pick your accent colors and your color scheming, whatever you need in there. And then you can see, backgrounds. This is the background of your computer, so you can go ahead and just change those. Of course, Linux Mint itself does have a lot of really pretty backgrounds also, so you can pick whatever type of background you want for your system without having to install anything else. They do have some of the absolute best. You can play your backgrounds as a slideshow if you want to, and then you can just select where the folder is, and then it'll just go ahead and recycle through all those images on whatever basis you want them to cycle. We have a variety of different preferences over here. You can sift through all those, and then here's hardware tasks, and then users and groups. This is where you're going to add extra users if you have a need for having more different users to the system. So go ahead and hit add, and then you can choose a standard or an administrator. So if you have kids, of course, pick a standard. Then they can't add software or do anything that's going to require an administration role in the system. One more thing I want to show you inside of your system settings is this online accounts. So this is for anybody that does have to have like a Google account, Microsoft account, or you might have some of these other account setups. You can go ahead and log into any of these guys here, and then this is going to give access to your calendar and to your contacts and things like that. And so you can see over here, there's a calendar plugin. So if you have calendar items on your phone and you are signed into the account that's used for your phone, they will automatically sync your calendar information over here as well. There's not a default contacts application, although you can install one that works. I don't actually have a Google account or Microsoft account. I do happen to have a Nextcloud account. So I'll just kind of show you guys briefly what this looks like. Go ahead and hit connect once you get logged in there. And now I have the option to share files, calendars, and contacts. So we'll go ahead and do that. And with that all set up, now I'm going to show you guys if I go into my calendar. And now you can see that we have the meetings that are on my phone are automatically synced over here. So if you do have online accounts, you can go ahead and do that. As far as files, right here is the access link to my files. I just go ahead and click on that. It's going to go online, and these are the files that are actually on my online cloud account. So that's how well this integrates. Now, if you do use email regularly, the email application that I personally prefer is going to be in the Software Center, and this is called Evolution. And if you install the Evolution email client, out of the box, this is it right here. This guy out of the box will sync your calendar, your contacts, your email, all of that type of stuff will automatically sync in. Actually, if you're doing a Google or Microsoft, I do not know if this will automatically sync your email manually. You might have to set that up. But that is another one of those features that I do really like in the system. And let's see. Here's your basic firewall setup. I think the basic firewall is turned off by default just to make sure that it's not going to cause any issues. You can easily toggle it on, and then you can set different rules here. You can experiment around with the different firewall settings. I personally manage my firewall in my router, so I don't worry about that as much, except on my laptop that travels around. All right, now we're going to show you just a basic tour of the system itself. So over here, of course, we have a menu. As I said, this is very similar to a Windows type system. Over here is all applications, and then they're all broken down into these categories here. So we just have a variety of different software packages in here. So I'll just highlight, here's our web browser. We have Thunderbird for email. Transmission is for torrents. We have the full suite of LibreOffice, everything from databasing, writing, all sorts of things, mostly compatible and almost entirely compatible with Microsoft Office. There's a few little caveats. I'll go ahead and link a video for you to see what those caveats might be. Here's basic media players and then some administration tools. We do have a backup tool. If you want to plug in a USB drive and do backups of your basic system, you can go ahead and do that. And then here's your system monitor. This guy will just kind of show us what's running in the background. You can see this is running on only 1.2 gigs out of 6.2 gigs, and the CPUs are not overly busy right now. This is a very nice streamlined setup. And then on this, you can do whatever type of stuff you want. You can do your web browsing. You can do your email. If you want to add an icon down here at the bottom, just right-click it, add the panel, and boom, we have our panel down here on the bottom. You can hit enter your panel edit mode, and then this will allow you to move different things around. I like taking this show desktop thing and throw over here. Although if when you run system updates, you get the latest version of Cinnamon, you actually don't need this as a show desktop. Let me show you guys what it does here real quick. Just like in Windows, if you hit that show desktop icon, it's just going to minimize all your windows. The new version of Cinnamon, if we apply the updates in our system, will actually give us a little bar just like Windows has. So we don't need to worry about any of that. As far as your basic file management, it's very much the same as Windows. In fact, Windows stole its file management system from Linux. You have a documents folder, you have a downloads folder, here's a music folder, here's a picture folder. Obviously, you can put things pretty much wherever you want to put them within your home folder, but if you keep things organized, applications like Rhythmbox and gthumb knows where to look for certain types of files for what it needs. And so there is your basic tour of Linux Mint and basic setup and configuration for first use. Now you are ready to go and you have a system very much like a Windows setup, and now you can get back to being fairly productive. So with this, guys, thank you for watching this video. Again, I will have a couple resources linked down below to help you also get started on your journey. But hopefully this has been helpful for you getting an OEM install of Linux Mint ready for first use and customizing it to your preferences. So thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux. Thank you for watching this video from Switched to Linux. This channel would not be possible without the backing of the program supporters scrolling on the screen now. You can be a supporter at Patreon at patreon.com/TOMM or at thinklifemedia.com. I also want to thank the open source community who creates such excellent software that makes producing this show possible. Please remember to support your software communities. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.